The sun in Port Harcourt did not just shine, it weighed down on you. For 12-year-old Amara, the heat was a constant companion, much like the hunger that lived in the hollow of her stomach. She sat on a discarded cement block near the Mile 1 market, watching the world rush by. To the commuters in their yellow buses, she was invisible, just another fragment of the city's debris. Beside her sat her mother, Mama Zainab. Her mother was a woman of whispers and shadows. Sometimes she laughed at jokes only she could hear. Other times she stared at the gutter with a profound, terrifying silence. Amara held her mother's hand, feeling the rough calluses. She was the parent now, the guardian of a mind that had wandered off years ago and forgotten the way back. Amara's only weapon against the world was her memory. A few years prior, a woman named Mrs. Benson had seen Amara begging and decided to pay her school fees. For 2 glorious years, Amara sat in a classroom. She absorbed facts like a sponge. She loved the logic of numbers and the rhythm of prose. But then, Mrs. Benson moved away. The money dried up. The uniform grew small and tattered. The gates of the school slammed shut, but Amara's mind remained open. She spent her days scavenging for discarded newspapers and listening to the radio through the open windows of parked cars. She taught herself to read the signs on the shops and calculate the change for the market women. She was a scholar of the streets, a genius dressed in rags, waiting for a chance to prove that she existed. Royal Haven International School was a fortress of privilege. It stood behind high white walls topped with electric wire, a stark contrast to the sprawling slums that surrounded it. Inside, the floors were polished marble. Outside, the earth was cracked and red. Amara often lingered near the back fence of the school, where a massive, ancient mango tree stretched its branches over the wall. This tree was Amara's sanctuary. The school's gardeners ignored the girl who sat in the dirt beneath the overhanging limbs. From her spot in the dust, Amara could hear the sounds of high society education. She heard the ringing of bells, the laughter of children who never knew hunger, and the stern voices of teachers reciting lessons in English and mathematics. One afternoon, a specific sound caught her ear, the sound of sobbing. It wasn't the loud, dramatic cry of a child who scraped a knee. It was the quiet, rhythmic wheezing of someone who felt utterly defeated. Amara looked up. Perched on a stone bench on the other side of the iron bars was a girl her own age. The girl wore a crisp white blouse and a pleated navy skirt. Her hair was braided perfectly, adorned with ribbons that cost more than Amara's mother's daily medication. This was Lydia. She held a heavy textbook in her lap, her tears blurring the ink on the pages. In that moment, the fence didn't matter. Amara didn't see a rich girl. She saw a soul in pain. "Why do you cry?" Amara asked softly. Lydia wiped her eyes, looking ashamed. "I'm stupid," she whispered, barely audible over the sound of distant traffic. "The teacher says I'm lazy, and my father says I'm not trying. But the numbers, they dance. I can't make them stay still." She pointed to a page of long division and fractions. To Lydia, it looked like a foreign language. To Amara, it looked like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Amara moved closer to the bars. "The numbers are not dancing," she said with a small, encouraging smile. "They're just shy. You have to speak to them in a way they understand." Amara picked up a stick and cleared a patch of dirt at her feet. "Look here. Forget the book for a second. Look at the ground." Using the stick, Amara drew a circle. She said, "Imagine this is a loaf of bread." She divided the circle into 4 parts. "If you give me 1 piece, how many are left for you?" Lydia watched, mesmerized. For the next hour, the fence between them disappeared. Amara didn't use the technical jargon the teachers used. She used stories. She turned fractions into slices of yam and division into a sharing harvest. For the first time in her life, Lydia understood. The fog in her brain cleared. When the final bell rang, Lydia stood up, her face glowing. "You're better than my tutor," she said. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Amara nodded, a spark of pride igniting in her chest. As Lydia ran back to her waiting limousine, Amara returned to the gutter where her mother slept. She was still hungry, but for the first time in years, she felt useful. The meetings became a daily ritual. Every afternoon at 2 o'clock, the Mango Tree Academy went into session. Lydia would bring her homework and a smuggled snack, sometimes a meat pie, sometimes a juice box, which she would push through the bars to Amara. Amara would eat while she explained the complexities of the solar system or the rules of English grammar. Amara's teaching style was born of necessity. Because she didn't have books, she had to visualize everything. She taught Lydia how to memorize history by turning the dates into a song. She taught her how to spell difficult words by breaking them into the sounds of the city. Lydia's grades began to climb. The teachers at Royal Haven were baffled. The girl who had been at the bottom of the class was suddenly answering questions with confidence. However, the contrast between their lives remained sharp. One afternoon, a heavy rainstorm broke. Lydia stood under the school's porch, dry and safe. Amara was drenched within seconds, her thin clothes clinging to her frame. She didn't leave, though. She stayed by the fence, shivering, to finish explaining a science project. "Go home, Amara," Lydia shouted over the rain. Amara looked at her, a sad smile on her face. "I don't have a home. The rain is just a bath I didn't ask for." That night, as Lydia lay in her silk-sheeted bed, she couldn't sleep. She thought about Amara huddled under a piece of plastic in the market. She realized that while she was learning about the world from Amara, she knew nothing about Amara's world. Chief Nwanko was a man who commanded silence when he entered a room. He was a self-made billionaire with a heart hardened by the cutthroat world of Nigerian oil and real estate. His greatest frustration was his daughter's lack of academic progress. He equated intelligence with worth, and he feared Lydia was soft. One evening, he sat in his study reviewing Lydia's latest report card. He blinked in surprise. Her math score had jumped from a failing grade to an A. Her English teacher had written a note. "Lydia's grasp of metaphor have improved significantly. She shows a unique, grounded perspective." The chief was suspicious. He knew his daughter hadn't suddenly become a genius overnight. "Lydia?" he called, his voice booming through the mansion. When she entered, he tapped the report card. "Explain this. Who has been doing your work for you? I checked the CCTV. Your private tutor hasn't been here a week." Lydia paled. She had promised Amara to keep their sessions a secret. Amara was terrified of the big men and their security guards. I've been studying in the garden, Papa," Lydia stammered. The chief narrowed his eyes. He didn't believe her for a second. He decided that the next day he would leave his office early. He would see for himself what or who was responsible for this miracle. He never expected to find a child of the streets. The following afternoon was quiet. Amara was sitting in her usual spot, her back against the mango tree, explaining the Industrial Revolution to Lydia. "It's like the big machines in the harbor," she said, gesturing toward the Port Harcourt docks. "They replaced the hands of 1,000 men, but they couldn't replace the heart." Lydia was scribbling notes when a heavy shadow fell over them. She looked up and gasped, her pen dropping into the dirt. Standing a few feet behind her was Chief Nwanko. He looked like a giant in his tailored agbada. His security detail stood at a distance, looking confused. The chief looked through the bars at Amara, barefoot, hair matted with dust, wearing a shirt that was more holes than fabric. Amara froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had spent her life avoiding men like this. To her, power meant being chased away. Power meant being told she was filth. She scrambled to her feet, prepared to bolt into the maze of the city. "Wait!" Lydia cried, grabbing the bars. "Papa, don't! She's my friend! She's the one who helped me!" The chief stayed silent for a long time, his gaze moving from the complex diagrams drawn in the dirt to the terrified girl holding a stick. He saw the intelligence in Amara's eyes, a sharp, piercing light that no amount of poverty could dim. He didn't see a beggar. He saw a teacher. "You," he said, his voice unusually quiet, "you taught her all this? In the dirt?" Amara didn't speak. She couldn't. She simply nodded, her legs shaking. She expected him to shout. She expected him to call the police for trespassing near his daughter's school. Instead, Chief Nwankwo walked up to the fence. He reached into his pocket, and Amara flinched, thinking he was reaching for a weapon or a phone to call the authorities. He pulled out a handkerchief and wiped the sweat from his brow. "My daughter was failing," he said, his voice thick with an emotion Lydia had never heard before. "I spent millions on the best tutors in the country. They failed. Why did you succeed?" Amara took a deep breath, finding a sliver of courage. "Because I didn't try to make her like me," Amara whispered. "I tried to make the books like her." The chief looked at the dirt again. He saw a drawing of the circulatory system etched into the red earth. It was perfect. "Where did you learn this?" he asked. Amara told him about her 2 years of school, about the newspapers she scavenged, and about the radio. She told him about her mother. The chief felt a rare pang of shame. He lived in a house with 50 rooms, while a mind like this was rotting in the sun. "Take me to your mother," the chief commanded. It wasn't a request. Amara hesitated. She was ashamed of the gutter where they slept. She was ashamed of Mama Zainab's wandering mind. But the chief's eyes weren't cold anymore. They were filled with a sudden, urgent purpose. He gestured to his driver. "Open the gate. We are going to the market." The luxury SUV crawled through the narrow, crowded streets of the slum, looking like a spaceship in a junkyard. People stared. Children chased the car, shouting. Amara sat in the back, her dusty skin pressed against the soft leather seats. She felt like an imposter. Beside her, Lydia held her hand, squeezing it tight. They reached the corner where the mad woman lived. Mama Zainab was having a bad day. She was standing near a trash heap, arguing vehemently with an invisible foe. Her clothes were gray with filth, and her hair was a wild crown of neglect. A crowd of boys were throwing small stones at her, laughing. When they saw the chief's car, they scattered like rats. The chief stepped out of the vehicle. The smell of the open gutter was overpowering, but he didn't cover his nose. He watched as Amara ran to her mother, wrapping her small arms around the woman's waist. "Mama, it's okay, I'm here," Amara soothed. Mama Zainab didn't recognize her. She just muttered about the spiders in the sky. The chief turned to his assistant. "Call the director of the St. Jude Psychiatric Clinic. Tell them I am sending a VIP patient. Now." He then looked at the gutter where Amara had been sleeping. He saw a small pile of books, wrapped in plastic to keep them dry. That was the moment Chief Nwankwo's heart finally broke. He realized that for all his billions, he had been blind to the gold lying in the streets. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. Mama Zainab was taken away in a clean white ambulance. She didn't fight, she was too tired. Amara cried as she watched her mother go, but the chief put a hand on her shoulder. "She is going to a place with beds and medicine," he said. "She will have dignity again." Then it was Amara's turn. She was taken to the Nwankwo estate. The servants looked at her with a mix of pity and judgment, but one look from the chief silenced them. She was given a bath, a real bath, with warm water and soap that smells like lavender. The dirt of years washed away, swirling down the drain. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized the girl staring back. She was given new clothes, not the fancy silks Lydia wore, but simple, high-quality cotton. That night, she sat at a dining table that could seat 20 people. There was more food in one bowl than she had seen in a month. She picked up a fork, her hand trembling. Lydia sat across from her, grinning. "Eat, Amara. Tomorrow we go to school together." Amara couldn't eat. She looked at the chief, who was watching her from the head of the table. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this for me?" The chief put down his glass. "Because," he said, "I realized that I wasn't just paying for Lydia's education, I was paying for her future. And you, Amara, are the first person who actually delivered it. You saved my daughter's mind. It is only fair I save your life." Walking through the front gates of Royal Haven as a student was the most terrifying moment of Amara's life. She wore the navy and white uniform now. Her hair was neatly braided, but in her mind, she was still the girl behind the fence. She expected the security guards to stop her. She expected the other children to smell the street on her. But Lydia was by her side, holding her arm like a shield. When they entered the classroom, the teacher, a stern woman named Mrs. Okoro, stopped talking. She had heard rumors about the scholarship girl the chief had brought in. She looked Amara up and down. "So, you are the one who has been teaching my student in the dirt?" she asked, her voice skeptical. "I just helped her see the patterns, Ma," Amara said, her voice small but steady. Mrs. Okoro pointed to the blackboard where a complex algebraic equation was written. "Since you are so advanced, why don't you solve this for the class?" The other students giggled. They knew Amara was a charity case. They expected her to fail. Amara walked to the board. She took the chalk. For a second, she closed her eyes and imagined the mango tree. She imagined the dirt and the stick. The fear vanished. Her hand moved with a grace that stunned the room. She solved the equation in 4 lines, and then, for good measure, showed a second way to reach the same answer. The classroom went silent. Mrs. Okoro's jaw dropped. "Sit down, Amara," she whispered. "Welcome to Royal Haven." As the weeks passed, Amara became a sensation. She wasn't just the street girl anymore, she was the prodigy. She topped every exam, but more importantly, she changed the way the other students learned. She started an informal study group under the very same mango tree where she used to hide. She didn't just teach math and science, she taught them about the world outside the white walls. She told them about the resilience of the market women and the engineering of the scrap metal workers. She humanized the city they had spent their lives ignoring. Lydia, on the other hand, flourished. With Amara's constant guidance, her confidence soared. She was no longer the slow girl. She was a capable student with a best friend who felt like a sister. Back at the psychiatric facility, the news was also good. With proper nutrition and the right medication, Mama Zainab's fog began to lift. The doctors discovered that her condition was largely brought on by extreme trauma and untreated postpartum depression, exacerbated by years of malnutrition. She wasn't mad, she was broken, and she was being put back together. Amara visited her every weekend. The first time her mother looked at her and didn't see a spider in the sky, but saw her daughter, was the happiest day of Amara's life. "Amara," her mother whispered, her eyes clear for the first time in a decade. "You look like a queen." Amara held her hand and wept. The cycle of misery had finally been broken by a single act of courage. Not everyone was happy with Amara's rise. A boy named Chidi, the son of a prominent politician, had always been the top of the class. He viewed Amara as a threat to his status. He began to spread rumors, reminding everyone where she came from. "You can wash the skin, but you can't wash the gutter out of the soul," he told a group in the cafeteria. He tried to trip her in the halls. He hid her books. One day, he even mocked her mother, calling her the crazy lady from the market. Amara felt the old anger rising, the hot, sharp, defensive instinct of the streets. She wanted to strike back. She wanted to show him that the streets taught her how to fight, long before they taught her to read. But she remembered the chief's words. "Dignity is a choice, Amara. Don't let him choose for you." Instead of fighting, she challenged Chidi to a public debate during the school's Founders' Day. The topic was social responsibility in modern Nigeria. Chidi spoke of policies and GDP. He spoke like a textbook. When it was Amara's turn, she spoke of the human cost of neglect. She spoke of the genius that dies in the gutters every day because nobody bothers to look down. She spoke with a passion that made the judges weep. When she finished, the entire auditorium stood up. Chidi sat in the front row, defeated. He realized that his privilege was a fence, but Amara's experience was a bridge. Chief Noenkwo sat in the front row during the debate, watching Amara. He realized that he hadn't just changed her life, she had changed his. He had spent his career building towers of steel and glass, but he had never built anything as resilient as this girl's spirit. He felt a sense of pride he hadn't felt in years, not the pride of a businessman, but the pride of a father. That evening, he called Amara into his study. "I have something for you," he said. He handed her a legal document. It was a trust fund established in her name, covering her education all the way through a PhD at any university in the world. But more importantly, there was a second document, a deed to a small, comfortable house in a safe neighborhood. "This is for your mother when she is released," the chief said. "She will never have to worry about a roof over her head again, and I have arranged a job for her at one of my foundations, helping other women who have fallen through the cracks." Amara couldn't speak. She just hugged him, her tears staining his expensive agbada. "I didn't have a father," she whispered. The chief patted her head. "You do now, and Lydia has a sister. Our family was too small anyway. It needed someone with your heart to fill the empty spaces." The street child was gone. In her place stood a young woman who knew she was loved. And for Amara, that was the greatest miracle of all. A year had passed since the day the chief discovered them. To celebrate their anniversary, Amara and Lydia didn't go to a fancy restaurant. They went to the back fence of Royal Haven. They brought a basket of food and sat in the dirt beneath the mango tree. The tree was heavy with fruit now, its branches bowing under the weight. They looked at the spot where Amara used to draw her lessons. The rain had long since washed away the chalk and the stick marks, but the impact remained. "I still can't believe it," Lydia said, biting into a mango. "If I hadn't cried that day, where would you be?" Amara looked at the school gates. "I'd still be here, Lydia, but I would be on the other side of the bars." They saw a group of younger children looking at them through the fence. These were the new invisible ones, the ones the world tried to ignore. Amara didn't just look away. She stood up and walked to the fence. She reached through the bars and handed a mango to a small, dusty boy who reminded her of herself. "Keep your head up," she told the boy. "The world is big, but your mind is bigger." She realized then that her mission wasn't just to succeed for herself. It was to make sure the Mango Tree Academy never truly closed. She promised herself that one day she would build schools that had no fences, places where intelligence was the only currency that mattered. The story of Amara and Lydia became a legend in Port Harcourt. It reminded people that potential is not a matter of birthright, but of opportunity. Mama Zainab eventually moved into her new home. She still had bad days, but now she had a garden to tend to and a daughter who came home every night to tell her about the world. Amara graduated from Royal Haven as the valedictorian. Her speech was short but went viral across the country. She didn't talk about her grades. She talked about the one person. She said, "Sometimes all it takes to change a life is one person who chooses to see you, not as a problem to be solved, but as a human to be known." As she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she didn't just see the chief and Lydia cheering. She saw the version of herself from a year ago, the girl in the tattered shirt sitting in the dust. She smiled at that girl. "We made it," she thought. "The numbers stopped dancing and we finally learned how to fly." The mango tree still stands behind the school. It remains a symbol of a hidden classroom where two worlds collided and created something beautiful. Amara's journey was just beginning, but she knew one thing for certain. No matter how high she rose, she would never forget the taste of the dust, the shade of the tree, and the power of a hand reached out in the dark.